Hello everyone, it's me, Leo, and today I'm going to be reading you a few stories from the book Hearn, Stories and Studies of Strange Things, written by Lafcadio Hearn, who, despite being a British, Irish, Greek person, is considered to be one of the most important authors for old Japanese folklore. Yeah. And today, as you can see, I am using the Omori model because I thought it fitting. Yeah, okay. So, I think I will start straight up. So, sit down or even lie down and enjoy the stories. Remember, those can be sometimes kind of scary and sometimes also pretty weird because those are folk tales. Some even learn from word of mouth. And yeah, you just have to maybe listen to it again if you're confused. But I will read them as they are. First story today, Oshidori. There was a falconer and hunter named Sonjo who lived in a district called Namura-no-go of the province of Mutsu. One day, he went out hunting. He could not find any game. But on his way home, at a place called Akanuma, he perceived a pair of Oshidori, also called mandarin ducks, swimming together in a river that he was about to cross. To kill Oshidori is not good, but Sonjo happened to be very hungry, so he shot at the pair. His arrow pierced the male. The female escaped into the rushes of the further shore and disappeared. Sonjo took the dead bird home and cooked it. That day, he dreamt a dreary dream. It seemed to him that a beautiful woman came into his room and stood by his pillow and began to weep. So bitterly did she weep that Sonjo felt as if his heart were being torn out while he listened. And the woman cried to him, "Why? Oh, why did you kill him? Of what wrong was he guilty? At Akanuma we were so happy together, and you killed him. What harm did he ever do you? Do you even know what you have done? Oh, why did you kill him? Oh, do you know what a cruel, what a wicked thing you have done? Me too you have killed, for I will not live without my husband. Only to tell you this I came." Then again she wept aloud, so bitterly that the voice of her crying pierced into the marrow of the listener's bones. And she sobbed out the words of this poem. "Hi kurureba, sasoishi mono o Akanuma no makomo no kure no hitori ne zouki." At the coming of twilight, I invited him to return with me, now to sleep alone in the shadow of the rushes of Akanuma. Ah, what misery unspeakable. And after having uttered these verses, she exclaimed, "Ah, you do not know. You cannot know what you have done. But tomorrow, when you go to Akanuma, you will see. You will see." So saying, and weeping very piteously, she went away. When Sonjo awoke in the morning, this dream remained so vivid in his mind that he was greatly troubled. He remembered the words, "But tomorrow, when you go to Akanuma, you will see. You will see." And he resolved to go there at once, that he might learn whether his dream was anything more than a dream. So he went to Akanuma, and there, when he came to the riverbank, he saw the female Oshidori swimming alone. In the same moment, the bird perceived Sonjo, but instead of trying to escape, she swam straight towards him, looking at him the while in a strange fixed way. Then, with her beak, she suddenly tore open her own body and died before the hunter's eyes. Sonjo shaved his head and became a priest after that. This is the end of today's first story, called Oshidori. The second story for today is the story of Ote. A long time ago, in the town of Niigata, in the province of Echizen, there lived a man called Nagao Chose. Nagao was the son of a physician and was educated for his father's profession. At an early age, he had been betrothed to a girl called Ote, the daughter of one of his father's friends, and both families had agreed that the wedding should take place as soon as Nagao had finished his studies. The health of Ote proved to be weak, and in her 15th year she was attacked by a fatal consumption. When she became aware that she must die, she sent for Nagao to bid him farewell. As he knelt at her bedside, she said to him, "Nagao-sama, my betrothed, we were promised to each other from the time of our childhood, and we were to have been married at the end of this year, and now I am going to die. The gods know what is best for us. If I were able to live for some years longer, I could only continue to be a cause of trouble and grief for others. With this frail body, I could not be a good wife, and therefore, even to wish to live for your sake would be a very selfish wish. I am quite resigned to die, and I want you to promise that you will not grieve. Besides, I want to tell you that I think we shall meet again." "Indeed, we shall meet again," Nagao answered earnestly, "and then in the pure land there will be no pain of separation." "Nay, nay," she responded softly. "I meant not the pure land. I believe that we are destined to meet again in this world, although I shall be buried tomorrow." Nagao looked at her wonderingly and saw her smile at his wonder. She continued in her gentle, dreamy voice, "Yes, I mean in this world, in your own present life, Nagao-sama, providing indeed that you wish it. Only, for this thing to happen, I must again be born a girl and grow up to womanhood, so you will have to wait 15, 16 years. That is a long time. For my promised husband, you are now only 19 years old." Eager to soothe her dying moments, he answered tenderly, "To wait for you, my betrothed, were no less joy than a duty. We are pledged to each other for the time of 7 existences. But you doubt? She questioned, watching his face. My dear one, he answered, I doubt whether I should be able to know you in another body, under another name, unless you can tell me of a sign or a token. That I cannot do, she said. Only the gods and the Buddhas know how and where we shall meet, but I am sure, very, very sure, that if you be not unwilling to receive me, I shall be able to come back to you. Remember these words of mine. She ceased to speak, and her eyes closed. She was dead. Nagao had been sincerely attached to Ote, and his grief was deep. He had a mortuary tablet made, inscribed with her Zokunyo, and he placed the tablet in Hinputsudan, and every day set offerings before it. He thought a great deal about the strange things that Ote had said to him just before her death, and, in the hope of pleasing her spirit, he wrote a solemn promise to wed her if she could ever return to him in another body. This written promise is sealed with his seal and placed in the Butsudan beside the mortuary tablet of Ote. Nevertheless, as Nagao was his only son, it was necessary that he should marry. He soon found himself obliged to yield to the wishes of his family and to accept the wife of his father's choosing. After his marriage, he continued to set offerings before the tablet of Ote, and he never failed to remember her with affection. But by degrees her image became dim in his memory, like a dream that is hard to recall, and the years went by. During those years, many misfortunes came upon him. He lost his parents by death, and his wife, and his only child, so that he found himself alone in the world. He abandoned his desolate home and set out upon a long journey in the hope of forgetting his sorrows. One day, in the course of his travels, he arrived at Ikao, a mountain village, still famed for its thermal springs and for the beautiful scenery of its neighborhood. In the village inn at which he stopped, a young girl came to wait upon him, and at the first sight of her face, he felt his heart leap as it had never leaped before. So strangely did she resemble Ote that he pinched himself to make sure that he was not dreaming. And as she went and came, bringing fire and wood, or arranging the chamber of the guest, her every attitude and motion revived in him some gracious memory of the girl to whom he had been pledged in his youth. He spoke to her, and she responded in a soft, clear voice, of which the sweetness saddened him with the sadness of other days. Then, in great wonder, he questioned her, saying, "Elder sister, so much do you look like a person who I knew long ago. I was startled when you first entered this room. Pardon me, therefore, for asking, what is your native place, and what is your name?" Immediately, and in the unforgotten voice of the dead, she thus made answer, "My name is Ote, and you are Nagao Chosei of Echigo, my promised husband. 17 years ago I died in Niigata, and you made in writing a promise to marry me if ever I could come back to this world in the body of a woman. And you sealed that written promise with your seal, and you put it in the Butsudan, beside the tablet inscribed with my name. and therefore I came back. As she uttered these last words, she fell unconscious. Nagao married her, and the marriage was a happy one. But had no time afterwards could she remember what she had told him in answer to his question at Ikao. Neither could she remember anything of her previous existence. The recollection of her former birth, mysteriously kindled in the moment of that meeting, had again become obscured, and so thereafter remained. This is the end of the story of Ote. And it seems that reading those Japanese words are making me speak English with a Japanese accent sometimes. Let me have a sip of my water before I continue. Okay. Welcome everyone coming in. I hope you are comfortable right now. So, the third story of today is Ubazakura. 300 years ago, in the village called Asamimura, in a district called Onsengori, in the province of Iyo, there lived a good man named Tokube. This Tokube was the richest person in the district, and the Muraosa, or headman, of the village. In most matters he was fortunate, but he reached the age of 40 without knowing the happiness of becoming a father. Therefore he and his wife, in the affliction of their childlessness, addressed many prayers to the divinity Fudo Myo-o, who had a famous temple called Saihoji in Asamimura. At last their prayers were heard. The wife of Tokube gave birth to a daughter. The child was very pretty, and she received the name of Tsuyu. As the mother's milk was deficient, a milk nurse called Osode was hired for the little one. Otsuyu grew up to be a very beautiful girl, but at the age of 15 she fell sick, and the doctors thought that she was going to die. In that time, the nurse Osode, who loved Otsuyu with a real mother's love, went to the temple Saihoji and fervently prayed to Fudo-sama on behalf of the girl. Every day, for 21 days, she went to the temple and prayed, and at the end of that time, Otsuyu suddenly and completely recovered. Then there was great rejoicing at the house of Tokube, and he gave a feast to all his friends in celebration of the happy event. But on the night of the feast, the nurse Osode was suddenly taken ill, and on the following morning, the doctor, who had been summoned to attend her, announced that she was dying. Then the family in great sorrow gathered about her bed to bid her farewell, but she said to them, "It is time that I should tell you something which you do not know. My prayer has been heard. I besought Fudo-sama that I might be permitted to die in the place of Otsuyu, and his great favor has been granted me. Therefore you must not grieve my death, but I have one request to make. I promised Fudo-sama that I would have a cherry tree planted in the garden of Saihoji for a thank offering and a commemoration. Now, I shall not be able myself to plant the tree there, so I must beg that you will fulfill that vow for me. Goodbye, dear friends, and remember that I was happy to die for Otsuyu's sake." After the funeral of Osode, a young cherry tree, the finest that could be found, was planted in the garden of Saihoji by the parents of Otsuyu. The tree grew and flourished, and on the 16th day of the second month of the following year, the anniversary of Osode's death, it blossomed in a wonderful way. So it continued to blossom for 254 years, always upon the 16th day of the second month, and its flowers, pink and white, were like the nipples of a woman's breast, bedewed with milk, and the people called it Ubazakura, the cherry tree of the milk nurse. Okay, friends, this is the end of the story, the Ubazakura story. I'm gonna be honest, my friends, I did not expect that kind of comparison for the flowers of a cherry tree. But it's just how all stories are written sometimes. Okay, on to our next story called Diplomacy. It had been ordered that the execution should take place in the garden of the yashiki. So the man was taken there and made to kneel down in a wide sanded space crossed by a line of tobiishi or stepping stones, such as you may see still in Japanese landscape gardens. His arms were bound behind him, retainers brought water in buckets, and rice bags filled with pebbles, and they packed the rice bags round the kneeling man, so wedging him in that he could not move. The master came and observed the arrangements. He found them satisfactory and made no remarks. Suddenly, the condemned man cried out to him, "Honored sir, the fault for which I have been doomed I did not wittingly commit. It was only my very great stupidity which caused the fault. Having been born stupid by reason of my karma, I could not always help making mistakes. But to kill a man for being stupid is wrong, and that wrong will be repaid. So surely as you kill me, so surely shall I be avenged. Out of the resentment that you provoke will come the vengeance, and evil will be rendered for evil. If any person be killed while feeling strong resentment, the ghost of that person will be able to take vengeance upon the killer. This the samurai knew. He replied very gently, almost caressingly, "We shall allow you to frighten us as much as you please after you are dead. But it is difficult to believe what you mean what you say. Will you try to give us some sign of your great resentment after your head has been cut off?" "Assuredly I will," answered the man. "Very well," said the samurai, drawing his long sword. "I am now going to cut off your head. Directly in front of you there is a stepping stone. After your head has been cut off, try to bite the stepping stone. If your hungry ghost can help you to do that, some of us may be frightened. Will you try to bite the stone?" "I will bite it," cried the man in great anger. "I will bite it. I will bite." There was a flash, a swish, a crunching thud. The bound body bowed over the rice sacks, two long blood jets pumping from the shorn neck, and the head rolled upon the sand. Heavily towards the stepping stone it rolled, then suddenly bounding. It caught the upper edge of the stone between its teeth, clung desperately for a moment, and dropped inert. None spoke, but the retainers stared in horror at their master. He seemed to be quite unconcerned, He merely held out his sword to the nearest attendant, who, with a wooden dipper, poured water over the blade from haft to point, and then carefully wiped the steel several times with sheets of soft paper, and thus ended the ceremonial part of the incident. For months thereafter, the retainers and the domestics lived in ceaseless fear of ghostly visitation. None of them doubted that the promised vengeance would come, and their constant terror caused them to hear and to see much that did not exist. They became afraid of the sound of the wind in the bamboos, afraid even of the stirring of shadows in the garden. At last, after taking counsel together, they decided to petition their master to have a Sekaki service performed on behalf of the vengeful spirit. Quite unnecessary, the samurai said, when his chief retainer uttered the general wish. I understand that the desire of a dying man for revenge may be cause for fear, but in this case, there is nothing to fear. The retainer looked at his master beseechingly, but hesitated to ask the reason for the alarming confidence. Oh, the reason is simple enough, declared the samurai, finding the unspoken doubt. Only the very last intention of the fellow could have been dangerous, and when I challenged him to give me the sign, I diverted his mind from the desire of vengeance. He died with the set purpose of biting the stepping stone, and that purpose he was able to accomplish, but nothing else. All the rest he must have forgotten. So he did not feel any further anxiety about the matter. And indeed, the dead man get no more trouble. Nothing at all ever happened. End of the story called Diplomacy. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm quite fond of this one. That was quite the cunning decision by the samurai in that story. I did not expect this ending. I guess this is the time when I tell you guys that it is actually, for me too, the first time that I am reading those stories. That was interesting. Okay, some more water for the stoat today. Okay, so next story. Jiki Ninki. Once, when Muso Gokushi, a priest of the Zen sect, was journeying alone through the province of Mino, he lost his way in a mountain district where there was nobody to direct him. For a long time he wandered about helplessly, and he was beginning to despair of finding shelter for the night, when he perceived, on the top of a hill lighted by the last rays of the sun, one of those little hermitages called anjitsu, which are built for solitary priests. It seemed to be in ruinous condition, but he hastened to it eagerly, and found that it was inhabited by an aged priest, from whom he begged the favor of a night's lodging. This the old man harshly refused, but he directed Muso to a certain hamlet, in a valley adjoining where lodging and food could be obtained. Muso found his way to the hamlet, which consisted of less than a dozen farm cottages, and he was kindly received at the dwelling of the headman. 40 or 50 persons were assembled in the principal apartment at the moment of Muso's arrival, but he was shown into a small separate room where he was promptly supplied with food and bedding. Being very tired, he lay down to rest at an early hour, but a little before midnight he was roused from sleep by a sound of loud weeping in the next apartment. Presently the sliding screens were gently pushed apart, and a young man carrying a lighted lantern entered the room, respectfully saluted him and said, "Reverend Sir, it is my painful duty to tell you that I am now the responsible head of this house. Yesterday I was only the eldest son, but when you came here, tired as you were, we did not wish that you would feel embarrassed in any way. Therefore, we did not tell you that father had died only a few hours before. The people whom you saw in the next room are the inhabitants of this village. They all assembled here to pay their last respects to the dead, and now they are going to another village about 3 miles off, for by our custom, no one of us may remain in this village during the night after a death has taken place. We make the proper offerings and prayers, then we go away, leaving the corpse alone. Strange things always happen in the house when a corpse has thus been left, so we think that it will be better for you to come away with us. We can find you good lodging in the other village, but perhaps, as you are a priest, you have no fear of demons or evil spirits, and if you are not afraid of being left alone with the body, you will be very welcome to the use of this poor house. However, I must tell you that nobody except the priest would dare to remain here tonight." Mudo made answer, "For your kind intention and generous hospitality, I am deeply grateful. But I am sorry that you did not tell me of your father's death when I came. For though I was a little tired, I certainly was not so tired I should have found difficult in doing my duty as a priest had you told me. I could have performed the service before your departure. As it is, I shall perform the service after you have gone away, and I shall stay by the body until morning. I do not know what you mean by your words about the danger of staying here alone, but I am not afraid of ghosts or demons. Therefore, please to feel no anxiety of my account." The young man appeared to be rejoiced by these assurances, and expressed his gratitude in fitting words. Then the other members of the family and the folk assembled in the adjoining room, had been told of the priest's kind promises, came to thank him. After which the master of the house said, "Now, Reverend Sir, much as we regret to leave you alone, we must bid you farewell. By the rule of our village, none of us can stay here after midnight. We beg, kind sir, that you will take every care of your honorable body, while we are unable to attend upon you. And if you happen to hear or see anything strange during our absence, please tell us of the matter when we return in the morning." All then left the house except the priest, who went to the room where the dead body was lying. The usual offerings had been sent before the corpse, and a small Buddhist lamp, a tomyo, was burning. The priest recited the service and performed the funeral ceremonies, after which he entered into meditation. So meditating he remained through several silent hours, and there was no sound in the deserted village. But when the hush of the night was at its deepest, there noiselessly entered a shape, vague and vast, and in the same moment Musso found himself without power to move or speak. He saw that shape lift the corpse, as with hands devour it more quickly than a cat devours a rat, beginning at the head and eating everything, the hair and the bones and even the shroud. And the monstrous thing, having thus consumed the body, turned to the offerings and ate them also. Then it went away, as mysteriously as it had come. When the villagers returned next morning, they found the priest awaiting them at the door of the headsman's dwelling. All in turn saluted him, And when they had entered and looked about the room, no one expressed any surprise at the disappearance of the dead body and the offering. But the master of the house said to Musso, "Reverend sir, you have probably seen unpleasant things during the night. All of us were anxious about you, but now we are very happy to find you alive and unharmed. Gladly we would have stayed with you if it had been possible. The law of our village, as I told you last evening, obliges us to quit our houses after a death has taken place, and to leave the corpse alone. Whenever this law has been broken, heretofore some great misfortune has followed. Whenever it is obeyed, we find that the corpse and the offerings disappear during our absence. Perhaps you have seen the cause." Then Musso told of the dim and awful shape that had entered the death chamber to devour the body and the offerings. No person seemed to be surprised by his narration, and the master of the house observed, "What you have told us, Reverend sir, agrees with what has been said about this matter from ancient time." Musso then inquired, "Does not the priest on the hill sometimes perform the funeral service for your dead?" "What priest?" the young man asked. "The priest who yesterday evening directed me to this village," answered Musso. "I called at his anjitsu on the hill yonder. He refused me lodging but told me the way here." The listeners looked at each other as in astonishment, and after a moment of silence the master of the house said, "Reverend sir, there is no priest and there is no anjitsu on the hill. For the time of many generations there has not been any resident priest in this neighborhood." Musso said nothing more on the subject, for it was evident that his kind host supposed him to have been deluded by some goblin. But after having bidden them farewell and obtained all necessary information as to his road, he determined to look again for the hermitage on the hill, and so to ascertain whether he had really been deceived. He found the hanjitsu without any difficulty, and this time its aged occupant invited him to enter. When he had done so, the hermit humbly bowed before him, exclaiming, "Ah, I am ashamed. I am very much ashamed. I am exceedingly ashamed." "You need not be ashamed for having refused me shelter," said Musso. "You directed me to the village yonder, where I was very kindly treated, and I thank you for that favor." "I can give no man shelter," the recluse made answer. It is not the refusal that I am ashamed. I am ashamed only that you should have seen me in my real shape, for it was I who devoured the corpse and the offerings last night before your eyes. Know, reverend sir, that I am a jikinki, an eater of human flesh. Have pity upon me and suffer me to confess the secret fault by which I became reduced to this condition. A long, long time ago I was a priest in this desolate region. There was no other priest for many leagues around. So in that time, the bodies of the mountain folk who died used to be brought here, sometimes from great distances, in order that I might repeat over them the holy service. But I repeated the service and performed the rites only as a matter of business. I thought only of the food and the clothes that my sacred profession enabled me to gain. Because of this selfish impiety, I was reborn immediately after my death into the state of a jikininki. Since then, I have been obliged to feed upon the corpses of the people who died in this district. Every one of them I must devour in the way that you saw last night. Now, reverend sir, let me beseech you to perform a sigaki service for me. Help me by your prayers and entreat you, so that I may soon able to escape from this horrible state of existence. No sooner had the hermit uttered his petition than he disappeared, and the hermitage also disappeared at the same instant, and Muso Kokushi found himself kneeling alone in the high grass, beside an ancient and moss-grown tomb of the form called Gorinishi, which seemed to be the tomb of a priest. That was an interesting one. How are you guys finding the stories so far? Those are pretty unique, huh? If you want to see another perspective of those stories, I know that actually there was a movie that was made about this book that I am reading to you right now. Though it is a movie from 1964 and also very, very long movie. At last, I think around 3 hours. But yeah, those are interesting, I think. Very unique. But I am a huge, huge fan of any folklore type stories. So I do enjoy myself very much right now. Okay, next story. Mujina. On the Akasaka Road in Tokyo, there is a slope called Ki no Kunizaka, which means the slope of the province of Ki. I do not know why it is called the slope of the province of Ki. On one side of this slope you see an ancient moat, deep and very wide, with high green banks rising up to some places of gardens. And on the other side of the road extend the long and lofty walls of an imperial palace. Before the era of street lamps and jinrikisha, this neighborhood was very lonesome after dark, and belated pedestrians will go miles out of their way rather than mount the Ki no Kunizaka alone after sunset. All because of a mujina that used to walk here. The last man who saw the mujina was an old merchant of the Kyubashi quarter, who died about 30 years ago. This is the story as he told it. One night, at a late hour, he was hurrying up the Ki no Kunizaka when he perceived a woman crouching by the moat all alone and weeping bitterly. Fearing that she intended to drown herself, he stopped to offer her any assistance or consolation in his power. She appeared to be a slight and graceful person, handsomely dressed, and her hair was arranged like that of a young girl of a good family. "Oh, Jochu," he exclaimed, approaching her. "Oh, Jochu, do not cry like that. Tell me what the trouble is, and if there is any way to help you, I shall be glad to help you." He really meant what he said, for he was a very kind man. But she continued to weep, hiding her face from him with one of her long sleeves. "Oh, Jochu," he said again as gently as he could, please listen to me. This is no place for a young lady at night. Do not cry, I implore you. Only tell me how I may be of some help to you." Slowly, she rose up, turned her back to him, and continued to moan and sob behind her sleeve. He laid his hand lightly upon her shoulder and pleaded, "Oh, Jochu, oh, Jochu, oh, Jochu. Listen to me for just one little moment. Oh, Jochu, oh, Jochu." Then, that Ojochu turned around and dropped her sleeve and stroked her face with her hand. and the man saw that she had no eyes or nose or mouth, and he screamed and ran away. Up Kino Kunizaka he ran and ran, and all was black and empty before him. On and on he ran, never daring to look back. And at last he saw a lantern, so far away that it looked like the gleam of a firefly, and he made for it. It proved to be only the lantern of an itinerant soba seller who had set down his stand by the roadside. But any light and any human companionship was good after that experience, and he flung himself down at the feet of the soba seller, crying out, "Ah! Ah! Ah! Kore! 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 Kore!" roughly explained the soba man. "Here, what is the matter with you? Anybody hurt you?" "No, nobody hurt me," panted the other. "Only, Only scared you?" queried the peddler unsympathetically. "Robbers?" "Not robbers, not robbers," gasped the terrified man. I saw a woman by the moat, and she showed me, I cannot tell you what she showed me." "Eh, was it anything like this that she showed you?" cried the sober man, stroking his own face, which therewith became like unto an egg. And simultaneously the light went out. Oh, this one really was a horror story, huh? Once again, that was the story Mujina. I guess the creature stole his face and the face of the man that was making the soba. Oh, the next one is about a pretty famous yokai. And I think this is one of the original stories for that yokai itself. The story is called Rokurokubi. Nearly 500 years ago, there was a samurai named Isogai Heidaizaemon Aketsura in the service of Lord Kikuji of Kyushu. This Isogai had inherited from many warlike ancestors a natural aptitude for military exercises and extraordinary strength. While yet a boy, he had surpassed his teachers in the art of swordsmanship, in archery, and in the use of the spear, and had displayed all the capacities of a daring and skillful soldier. Afterwards, in the time of the Eikyo War, he so distinguished himself that high honors were bestowed upon him. But when the house of Kikuji came to ruin, Isogai found himself without a master. He might then easily have obtained service under another daimyo, but as he had never sought distinction for his own sake alone, and as his heart remained true to his former lord, he preferred to give up the world. So he cut off his hair and became a traveling priest, taking the Buddhist name of Kwaryo. But always, under the koromo of the priest, Kwaryo kept warm within him the heart of a samurai. As in other years he had laughed at peril, so now also he scorned danger. And in all weathers and all seasons he journeyed to preach the good law in places where no other priest would have dared to go. For that age was an age of violence and disorder, and upon the highways there was no security for the solitary traveler, even if he happened to be a priest. In the course of his first long journey, Kwaryo had occasion to visit the province of Kai. One evening, As he was traveling through the mountains of that province, darkness overcame him in a very lonesome district, leagues away from any village. So he resigned himself to pass the night under the stars, and having found a suitable grassy spot at the roadside, he lay down there and prepared to sleep. He had always welcomed discomfort, and even a bare rock was for him a good bed. When nothing better could be found, and the root of a pine tree an excellent pillow. His body was iron, and he never troubled himself about dews or rain or frost or snow. Scarcely had he lain down when a man came along the road, carrying an axe and a great bundle of chopped wood. This woodcutter halted on seeing Wario lying down, and after a moment of silent observation said to him in a tone of great surprise, "What kind of a man can you be, good sir, that you dare lie down alone in such a place as this? There are hunters about here, many of them. Are you not afraid of hairy things?" "My friend," cheerfully answered Quairo, "I am only a wandering priest, a cloud and water guest, as folks call it. Unsui no ryokaku. And I am not in the least afraid of hairy things, if you mean goblin foxes or goblin badgers or any creature of that kind. As for lonesome places, I like them. They are suitable for meditation. I am accustomed to sleeping in the open air, and I have learned never to be anxious about my life." "You must indeed be a brave man, sir priest," the peasant responded. "To lie down here, this place has such a bad name, a very bad name. But, as the proverb has it, Kunshi Ayayuki ni Chikayorazu. The superior man does not needlessly expose himself to peril, and I must assure you, sir, that it is very dangerous to sleep here. Therefore, although my house is only a wretched thatched hut, let me beg of you to come home with me at once. In the way of food, I have nothing to offer you. There is a roof at least, and you can sleep under it without risk." He spoke earnestly, and Quairo, liking the kindly tone of the man, accepted his modest offer. The woodcutter guided him along a narrow path, leading up from the main road through mountain forest. It was a rough and dangerous path, sometimes skirting precipices, sometimes offering nothing but a network of slippery roots for the foot to rest upon, sometimes winding over or between masses of jagged rock. But at last, Quairo found himself upon a cleared space at the top of a hill, with a full moon shining overhead, and he saw before him a small thatched cottage, cheerfully lighted from within. The woodcutter led him to a shed at the back of the house, whither water had been conducted through bamboo pipes from some neighboring stream, and the two men washed their feet. Beyond the shed was a vegetable garden and a grove of cedars and bamboos. Beyond the trees appeared the glimmer of a cascade, pouring from some loftier height and swaying in the moonshine like a long white robe. As Quairo entered the cottage with his guide, he perceived 4 persons, men and women, warming their hands at a little fire kindled in the door of the principal apartment. They bowed low to the priest and greeted him in the most respectful manner. Quairo wondered that persons so poor and dwelling in such a solitude should be aware of the polite forms of greeting. These are good people, he thought to himself, and they must have been taught by someone well acquainted with the rules of propriety. Then, turning to his host, the aduji, or housemaster, as the other called him, Wario said, "From the kindness of your speech and from the very polite welcome given me by your household, I imagine that you have not always been a woodcutter." Perhaps your family belonged to one of the upper classes. Smiling, the woodcutter answered, Sir, you are not mistaken. Thou no living as you find me, I was once a person of some distinction. My story is the story of a ruined life, ruined by my own fault. I used to be in the service of a daimyo. My rank in that service was not inconsiderable, but I loved women and wine too well, and under the influence of passion I acted wickedly. My selfishness brought about the ruin of our house and caused the death of many persons. Retribution followed me, and I long remained a fugitive in the land. Now, I often pray that I may be able to make some atonement from the evil which I did, and to re-establish the ancestral home, but I fear that I shall never find any way of doing so. Nevertheless, I try to overcome the karma of my errors by sincere repentance, and by helping as far as I can those who are unfortunate. Guido was pleased by the announcement of good resolve and said to the Aduji, My friend, I have had occasion to observe that men prone to folly in their youth may in after years become very earnest in right living. In the Holy Sutra it is written that those strongest in wrongdoing can become, by power of good resolve, the strongest in right doing. I do not doubt that you have a good heart, and I hope that better fortune will come to you. Tonight I shall recite the sutra for your sake, and pray that you may obtain the force to overcome the karma of any past errors. With the assurances, Guido bade the Aduji good night, and his host showed him to a very small side room where a bed had been made ready. Then all went to sleep except the priest, who began to read the sutra by the light of a paper lantern. Until a late hour he continued to read and pray. Then he opened a little window in his little sleeping room to take a last look at the landscape before laying down. The night was beautiful. There was no cloud in the sky, there was no wind, and the strong moonlight threw down sharp black shadows of foliage and glittered on the dews of the garden. Shrillings of crickets and bell insects made a musical tumult, and the sound of the neighboring cascade deepened with the night. Guido felt thirsty as he listened to the noise of the water, and remembering the bamboo aqueduct at the rear of the house, he thought they could go there and get a drink without disturbing the sleeping household. Very gently, he pushed apart the sliding screens that separated his room from the main apartment, and he saw by the light of the lantern 5 recumbent bodies without heads. For one instant he stood bewildered, imagining a crime. But in another moment he perceived that there was no blood, and that the headless necks did not look as if they had been cut. Then he thought to himself, either this is an illusion made by goblins, or I have been lured into the dwelling of a Rokurokubi. In the book So Shinki it is written that if one find the body of a Rokurokubi without its head, and remove the body to another place, the head will never be able to join itself again at the neck. The book further says that when the heads come back and find that its body has been moved, it will strike itself upon the wood or on the floor 3 times, bouncing like a ball, and will pant as if in great fear and presently die. Now, if these be Rokurokubi, they mean me no good, for I shall be justified in following the instructions of the book. He seized the body of the Aruji by the feet, pulled it to the window and pushed it out. Then he went to the back door, which he found barred, and he surmised that the heads had made their exit through the smoke hole in the roof, which had been left open. Gently unbarring the door, he made his way to the garden and proceeded with all possible caution to the grove beyond it. He heard voices talking in the grove, and he went in the direction of the voices, stealing from shadow to shadow until he reached a good hiding place. Then, from behind a trunk, he caught sight of the heads, all 5 of them, flitting about and chatting as they flitted. They were eating worms and insects which they found on the ground or among the trees. Presently, the head of the Aduji stopped eating and said, "Ha! That traveling priest who came at night. How fat all his body is! When we shall have eaten him, our bellies will be filled. I was foolish to talk to him as I did. It only set him to recite the sutras on behalf of my soul. To go near him when he is reciting would be difficult, and we cannot touch him so long as he is praying. But that it is now nearly morning, perhaps he has gone to sleep. So one of you go to the house and see what the fellow is doing." Another head, the head of a young woman, immediately rose up and flitted to the house, lightly as a bat. After a few minutes it came back and cried out huskily in the tone of great alarm, "The traveling priest is not in the house. He is gone. But that is not worst of the matter. He has taken the body of Aduji, and I do not know where he has put it." At this announcement, the head of the Aduji, distinctly visible in the moonlight, assumed a frightful aspect. Its eyes opened monstrously, its hair stood up bristling, and its teeth gnashed. And a cry burst from its lips, and weeping tears of rage it exclaimed, "Since my body has been moved to rejoin, it is not possible. Then I must die. And all through the work of that priest. Before I die, I will get at that priest. I will tear him. I will devour him. And there he is, behind that tree, hiding behind that tree. See him, the fat coward." And in the same moment, the head of the Aduji, followed by the other 4 heads, sprang at Guaido. The priest, the strong priest, had already harmed himself by plucking up a young tree, and with the tree he struck the heads as they came, knocking them from him with tremendous blows. 4 of them fled away, but the head of the Aduji, though battered again and again, desperately continued to bound at the priest, and at last caught him by the left sleeve of his robe. Guaido, however, as quickly gripped the head by its top knot and repeatedly struck it. It did not release its hold, but it uttered a long moan and thereafter ceased to struggle. It was dead, but its teeth still held the sleeve, and for all his great strength, Guaido could not force open the jaws. With the head still hanging to his sleeve, he went back to the house, and there caught sight of the other 4 Rokurokubi squatting together, with their bruised and bleeding hands reunited to their bodies. But when they perceived him at the back door, all screamed, "The priest! The priest!" and fled through the other doorway out into the woods. Eastward the sky was brightening. Day was about to dawn, and Guaido knew that the power of the goblins was limited to the hours of darkness. He looked at the head clinging to his sleeve, its face all foul with blood and foam and clay, and he laughed aloud as he thought to himself, "What a Miyagi! The head of a goblin!" After which he gathered together his few belongings and leisurely descended the mountain to continue his journey. Right on he journeyed until he came to Suwa in Shinano, and into the main street of Suwa he solemnly strode, with the head dangling at his elbow. The woman fainted and children screamed and ran away. And there was a great crowding, clamoring until the autorité, as the police in those days were called, seized the priest and took him to jail. For they supposed the head to be the head of a murdered man who, in the moment of being killed, had caught the murderer's sleeve in his teeth. As for Squire, he only smiled and said nothing when they questioned him. So, after having passed a night in prison, he was brought before the magistrates of the district. Then he was ordered to explain how he, a priest, had been found with the head of a man fastened to his sleeve, and why he had dared thus shamelessly to parade his crime in the sight of people. Guido laughed long and loudly at these questions and then said, "Sirs, I did not fasten the head to my sleeve. It fastened itself there, much against my will. And I have not committed any crime, for this is not the head of a man. It is the head of a goblin. And if I caused the death of the goblin, I did not do so by shedding any blood, but simply by taking the precautions necessary to ensure my own safety." And he proceeded to relate the whole of the adventure, bursting into another hearty laugh as he told of his encounter with the 5 heads. But the magistrate did not laugh. They judged him to be a hardened criminal and a story to insult their intelligence. Therefore, without further questioning, they decided to order his immediate execution. All of them, except one, a very old man. This aged officer had made no remark during the trial, but after having heard the opinion of his colleagues, he rose up and said, "Let us first examine the head carefully, for this, I think, has not yet been done. If the priest has spoken truth, the head itself should bear witness for him. Bring the head here." So the head, still holding in its teeth the koromo that had been stripped from Quairo's shoulders, was put before the judges. The old man turned it round and round, carefully examined it, and discovered on the nape of its neck several strange red characters. He called the attention of his colleagues to these, and also bade them observe that the edges of the neck nowhere presented the appearance of having been cut by any weapon. On the contrary, the line on leverance was smooth as a line, at which a falling leaf detaches itself from the stern. Then said the elder, "I am quite sure that the priest told us nothing but the truth. This is the head of a Rokurokubi. In the book Nan Hoi Butsushi, it is written that certain red characters can always be found upon the nape of the neck of a real Rokurokubi. These are the characters. You can see for yourself that they have not been painted. Moreover, it is well known that such goblins have been dwelling in the mountains of the province of Kai from an ancient time. But you, sir," he exclaimed, turning to Quaido, "what sort of sturdy priest may you be? Certainly you have given proof of a courage that few priests possess. You have the air of a soldier rather than a priest. Perhaps you once belonged to the samurai class." "You have guessed right, sir," Quaido responded. "Before becoming a priest, I long followed the profession of arms. In those days, I never feared man or devil. My name then was Isogai Heidazai Montaketsuda of Kyushu. There may be some among you who remember it." At the mention of that name, a murmur of admiration filled the courtroom, for there were many present who remembered it. And Quaido immediately found himself among friends instead of judges. Friends anxious to prove their admiration by fraternal kindness. With honor, they escorted him to the residence of the daimyo, who welcomed him and feasted him, and made him a handsome present before allowing him to depart. When Quaido left Suwa, he was as happy as any priest is permitted to be in this transitory world. As for the head, he took it with him. jocosely insisting that he intended for a miyage. And now, it only remains to tell what became of the head. A day or two after leaving Suwa, Guaido met with a robber who stopped him in a lonesome place and bade him strip. Guaido at once removed his koromo and offered it to the robber, who then first perceived what was hanging to the sleeve. Though brave, the highwayman was startled. He dropped the garment and sprang back. Then he cried out, "You! What kind of a priest are you? Why, you are a worse man than I am. It is true that I have killed people, but I never walked about with anybody's head fastened to my sleeve." "Well, sir priest, I suppose we are the same calling, and I must say that I admire you. No, that head would be of use to me. I could frighten people with it. Will you sell it? You can have any robe in exchange for your koromo, and I will give you 5 ryo for the head." Ryo answered, "I shall let you have the head and the robe if you insist. But I must tell you that this is not the head of a man. It is a goblin's head. So if you buy it and have any trouble in consequence, please to remember that you were not deceived by me." "What a nice priest you are," exclaimed the robber. "You kill men and jest about it." "But I am really in earnest. Here is my robe, and here is the money, and let me have the head. What is the use of joking?" "Take the thing," said Guadio. "I was not joking. The only joke, if there be any joke at all, is that you are fool enough to pay good money for a goblin's head." And Guaido laughed loudly and went upon his way. Thus, the robber got the head and the koromo, and after some time he played goblin priest upon the highways. But, reaching the neighborhood of Suwa, he then learned the true story of the head, and then became afraid that the spirit of the Rokurokubi might give him trouble. So he made up his mind to take back the head to the place from which it had come, and to bury it with its body. He found his way to the lonely cottage in the mountains of Kai, but nobody was there, and he could not discover the body. Therefore he buried the head by itself in the grove behind the cottage, and he had a tombstone set up over the grave, and he caused a segaki service to be performed on behalf of the spirit of the Rokurokubi. And that tombstone, known as the tombstone of the Rokurokubi, may be seen, or at least so the Japanese storyteller declares, even unto this day. Huh. That was an interesting one. That priest would be the hero of a manga or something. That man is impressive. That crazy person going around with a head attached to his sleeve. I guess he really is fearless. Okay guys, I have 2 more stories for you today. Okay? The first of which is called A Dead Secret. A long time ago, in the province of Tamba, there lived a rich merchant named Inamuraya Gensuke. He had a daughter called Osono. As she was very clever and pretty, he thought it would be a pity to let her grow up with only such teaching as the country teachers could give her. So he sent her in care of some trusty attendants to Kyoto, that she might be trained in a polite accomplishment taught to the ladies of the capital. After she had thus been educated, she was married to a friend of her father's family, a merchant named Nagaraya, and she lived happily with him for nearly 4 years. They had 1 child, a boy, but Osono fell ill and died in the 4th year after her marriage. On the night After the funeral of Osono, her little son said that his mama had come back and was in the room upstairs. She had smiled at him, but would not talk to him, so he became afraid and ran away. Then some of the family went upstairs to the room which had been Osono's, and they were startled to see by the light of a small lamp which had been kindled before a shrine in that room, the figure of the dead mother. She appeared as if standing in front of a tanse or chest of drawers that still contained her ornaments and her wearing apparel. Her head and shoulders could be very distinctly seen, but from the waist downwards the figure thinned into invisibility. It was like an imperfect reflection of her, and transparent as a shadow on the water. Then the folk were afraid and left the room. Below they consulted together, and the mother of Osono's Humbert said, "A woman is fond of her small things, and Osono was much attached to her belongings. Perhaps she has come back to look at them. Many dead persons will do that, unless the things be given to the parish temple. If we present Osono's robes and girdles to the temple, a spirit will probably find rest." It was agreed that this should be done as soon as possible. So on the following morning the drawers were emptied, and all of Osono's ornaments and dresses were taken to the temple. She came back the next night and looked at the tansu as before. And she came back also on the night following, and the night after that, and every night. And the house became a house of fear. The mothers of Osono's husband then went to the parish temple and told the chief priest all that had happened and asked for ghostly counsel. The temple was a Zen temple, and the head priest was a learned old man known as Daigen Osho. He said there must be something about which she is anxious, in or near that tansu. "But we emptied all the drawers," replied the woman. "There is nothing in the tansu." "Well," said Daigen Osho, "tonight I shall go to your house and keep watch in that room and see what can be done. You must give orders that no person shall enter the room while I am watching unless I call." After sundown, Daigen Osho went to the house and found the room made ready for him. He remained there alone reading the sutra, and nothing appeared until after the hour of the rat. Then the figure of Osono suddenly outlined itself in front of the dancer. Her face had a wistful look, and she kept her eyes fixed upon the dancer. The priest uttered the holy formula prescribed in such cases, and then, addressing the figure by the kaimyo of Osono, said, "I have come here in order to help you. Perhaps in that dancer there is something which you have reason to feel anxious. Shall I try to find it for you?" The shadow appeared to give assent by a slight motion of the head, and the priest, rising, opened the top drawer. It was empty. Successively he opened the second, the third, and the fourth drawer. He searched carefully behind them and beneath them. He carefully examined the interior of the chest. He found nothing. The figure remained gazing as wistfully as before. "What can she want?" thought the priest. Suddenly it occurred to him that there might be something hidden under the paper with which the drawer was lined. Removed the lining of the first drawer. Nothing. He removed the lining of the second and third drawer. Still nothing. But under the lining of the lowermost drawer he found a letter. "Is this the thing about which you have been troubled?" he asked. The shadow of the woman turned towards him, a faint gaze fixed upon the letter. Will I burn it for you? He asked. She bowed before him. It shall be burned in the temple this very morning, he promised, and no one shall read it except myself. The figure smiled and vanished. Dawn was breaking as the priest descended the stairs to find the family waiting anxiously below. Do not be anxious, he said to them. She will not appear again. And she never did. The letter was burned. It was a love letter, written to also know in the time of her studies at Kyoto. The priest alone knew what was in it, and the secret died with him. That is the end of the story, The Dead Secret. And come on, Arthur. Well, I guess it's a folk story, so I don't have an Arthur to blame, but why is all of this just a huge cliffhanger? We don't know the content of the letter. We don't know why it is important. It is killing me, guys. Oh my god. Also, I'm starting to wonder, why do every young wife in those stories end up dying a few years later? Those poor women. Those poor women. Okay, everyone, we have one last story for today. I do not mean that I have read the whole book to you guys, but I felt that this story was a good one to end up with, because it is actually the most famous one written in that book and also transmitted by that author. It is the story of the Yuki-onna. The story that the author wrote after discussing with a fisherman in a village to have the original legend of what was considered to be a real encounter with that yokai. Oh, and if you wonder, every time the word goblin is used in one of those stories, it actually is an old translation for the word yokai that you might be a little more familiar with. Okay, I will stop giving you guys a lesson that you never asked for and continue with the last story of the day. The story of the Yuki-onna. In a village of Musashi province, there lived two woodcutters, Mosaku and Minokichi. At the time of which I am speaking, Mosaku was an old man, and Minokichi, his apprentice, was a lad of 18 years. Every day they went together to a forest situated about 5 miles from their village. On the way to that forest, there was a wide river to cross, and there is a ferry boat. Several times a bridge was built where the ferry is. The bridge was each time carried away by a flood. No common bridge can resist the current there when the river rises. Mosaku and Minokichi were on their way home one very cold evening when a great snowstorm overtook them. They reached the ferry, and they found that the boatman had gone away, leaving his boat on the other side of the river. It was no day for swimming, and the woodcutters took shelter in the ferryman's hut. Thinking themselves lucky to find any shelter at all, there was no brazier in the hut, nor any place in which to make a fire. It was only a 2-mat hut, with a single door but no window. Mosaku and Minokichi fastened the door and lay down to rest, with their straw raincoats over them. At first they did not feel very cold, and they thought that the storm would soon be over. The old man almost immediately fell asleep, but the boy Minokichi lay awake a long time, listening to the awful wind and the continual slashing of the snow against the door. The river was roaring, and the hut swayed and creaked like a junk at sea. It was a terrible storm, and the air was every moment becoming colder, and Minokichi shivered under his raincoat. But at last, in spite of the cold, he too fell asleep. He was awakened by a showering of snow in his face. The door of the hut had been forced open, and by the snow light he saw a woman in the room. A woman all in white. She was bending over Mosaka and blowing her breath upon him, and her breath was like a bright white smoke. Almost in the same moment she turned to Minokichi and stooped over him. He tried to cry out, but found that he could not utter any sound. The white woman bent down over him, lower and lower, until her face almost touched him, and he saw that she was very beautiful. Though her eyes made him afraid, for a little time she continued to look at him. Then she smiled and she whispered, "I intended to treat you like the other man, but I cannot help feeling some pity for you because you are so young. You are a pretty boy, Minokichi, and I will not hurt you now, but if you ever tell anybody, even your own mother, about what you have seen this night, I shall know it, and then I will kill you. Remember what I said." With these words, she turned from him and passed through the doorway. Then he found himself able to move, and he sprang up and looked out. The woman was nowhere to be seen, and the snow was driving fiercely into the hut. Minokichi closed the door and secured it by fixing several billets of wood against it. He wondered if the wind had blown it open. He thought that he might have been only dreaming, and might have mistaken the gleam of the snow light in the doorway for the figure of a white woman. But he could not be sure. He called to Mosaka and was frightened because the old man did not answer. He put out his hand in the dark and touched Mosaka's face and found that it was ice. Mosaka was stark and dead. By dawn, the storm was over, and when the ferryman returned to his station a little after sunrise, he found Minokichi lying senseless beside the frozen body of Mosaka. Minokichi was promptly cared for and soon came to himself, but remained a long time ill from the effects of the cold of that terrible night. He had been greatly frightened also by the old man's death, but he said nothing about the vision of the woman in white. As soon as he got well again, he returned to his calling, going alone every morning to the forest and coming back at nightfall with his bundles of wood, which his mother harmed him to sell. One evening, in the winter of the following year, he was on his way home. He overtook a girl who happened to be traveling by the same road. She was a tall, slim girl, very good looking, and she answered Minokichi's greeting in a voice as pleasant to the ear as the voice of a songbird. He then walked beside her and they began to talk. The girl said that her name was Oyuki, and she had lately lost both of her parents, and that she was going to Yedo when she happened to have some poor relations who might help her to find a situation as a servant. Minokichi soon felt charmed by this strange girl, and the more that he looked at her, the handsomer she appeared to be. He asked her whether she was yet betrothed, and she answered laughingly that she was free. Then, in her turn, she asked Minokichi whether he was married or pledged to marry, and he told her that although he had only a widowed mother to support, the question of an honorable daughter-in-law has not yet been considered, as he was very young. After these confidences, they walked on for a long while without speaking. But, as the proverb declares, "Higa areba, memo kuchi hado ni mono wo iu." When the wish is there, eyes can say as much as the mouth. By the time they reached the village, they had become very much pleased with each other, and then Minokichi asked Oyuki to rest a while at his house. After some shy hesitation, she went there with him, and his mother made her welcome and prepared a warm meal for her. Oyuki behaved so nicely that Minokichi's mother took a sudden fancy to her and persuaded her to delay her journey to Yedo. And the natural end of the matter was that Yuki never went to Yedo at all. She remained in the house as an honorable daughter-in-law. Oyuki proved to be a very good daughter-in-law. When Minokichi's mother came to die some 5 years later, her last words were words of affection and praise for the wife of her son. And Oyuki bore Minokichi 10 children, boys and girls, handsome children, all of them very fair of skin. The country folk thought Oyuki a wonderful person, by nature different from themselves. Most of the peasant women aged early, but Oyuki, even having become the mother of 10 children, looked as young and fresh as the day she had first come to the village. One night, after the children had gone to sleep, Oyuki was sewing by the light of a paper lamp, and Minokichi, watching her, said, "To see you sewing there with the light on your face makes me think of a strange thing that happened when I was a lad of 18. I then saw somebody as beautiful as white as you are now. Indeed, she was very like you." Without lifting her eyes from her work, Oyuki responded, "Tell me about her. Where did you see her?" Then Minokichi told her about the terrible night in the ferryman's hut, and about the white woman that had stooped above him, smiling and whispering, and about the silent death of the old Mosaku, and he said, "Asleep or awake, that was the only time that I saw a being as beautiful as you. Of course, she was not a human being, and I was afraid of her, very much afraid, but she was so white. Indeed, I have never been sure whether it was a dream that I saw, or the woman of the snow, the Yuki-onna." Oyuki flung down her sewing and arose, and bowed above Minokichi where he sat, and shrieked into his face, "It was I, Yuki it was, and I told you then that I would kill you if you ever said one word about it. But for those children asleep here, I would kill you this moment. And now you had better take very, very good care of them, for if they ever have reason to complain of you, I will treat you as you deserve." Even as she screamed, her voice became very thin, like crying of wind. Then she melted into a bright white mist that spied to the roof beams, and shuddered away through the smoke hole. Never again was she seen. And that is the end of the story of the Yuki-onna. A very sad story. I remember reading that it was a sad story, and yeah, it actually is, because in the end she was the one that disappeared after falling in love because her husband could not keep his promise. Okay, everyone, that will be the end of the stories for today. I hope you enjoyed discovering some of the stories from the book called Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things, written by Lafcadio Hearn. The book itself has passed its legal copyright date, so do not worry, and if you are interested you could read it yourself, because the book is freely accessible online. It is considered to be one of the most important books about Japanese folklore. I did not read all of it for you, so do never hesitate to try and give it a look yourself. For the next time that I will read stories for you guys, which should come in 2 weeks, I think I will actually make a poll on our community Discord server for everyone to have a chance of choosing what is going to be the next act in our stories. First time, we had some Lovecraft. This week, we had Japanese folklore tales. Who knows what's going to be the next one? But for today, I hope you were interested, entertained, and maybe even relaxed by what happened today. I will wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, or a good night, depending on where you are in the world and when you are watching this stream. Hello, bird watchers. I'm very glad and surprised that some of you reached that point in the video. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, and I will see you next week for the next ASMR. Otsu Leo, and have a good one, everyone. Take care.